There's an image I want to plant in your mind right at the start. Imagine a spider's web in the early morning covered with dewdrops. Each tiny drop catches the light. But here's the remarkable thing. If you look closely at any single drop, you'll see reflected in it all the other drops. And in each of those reflected drops, the reflections of all the other drops again, and so on. Ad infinitum. This, I'm told, is the Buddhist conception of the universe in an image. Everything contains everything else. Everything reflects everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. Now, that sounds very poetic, doesn't it? Very mystical and Eastern. The sort of thing you'd nod along to and then go right back to feeling like a small separate person bumping into a vast, indifferent universe. But what if this image isn't just poetry? What if it's actually a more accurate description of what's going on than the story you've been telling yourself your whole life? Let's examine the story most of us live by, the one we absorbed without ever choosing it. The myths underlying our culture and underlying our common sense have not taught us to feel identical with the universe. They've taught us to feel like parts of it, only in it, confronting it. Aliens. Think about the language we use. We say, I came into this world, as if you were a stranger who walked through a door into a pre-existing room. We talk about facing reality, encountering life, as if reality were a kind of opponent you have to wrestle with. We have the sensation that we are someone living inside a bag of skin, a little center of consciousness peering out through two holes in a skull at a universe that is fundamentally not us. And from this sensation comes everything else: the anxiety, the loneliness, the feeling that we're on probation here, that we have to justify our existence, that the universe doesn't particularly care whether we live or die. But here's what's so fascinating. This feeling of separation, this sensation that you exist inside your skin and everything else is outside, is a hallucination, not a metaphor, not a philosophical position. A hallucination. You didn't come into this world. You came out of it. As leaves come out of a tree, as waves come out of the ocean. Let's stay with that wave for a moment. You are a function of what the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. Now, a wave is a marvelous thing to observe. It has a distinct shape, a particular height, a certain speed. It rises, it crests, it breaks, it dissipates. We can give it a name if we like. We can say, look at that wave. Isn't it beautiful? But here's the question. Where does the wave stop and the ocean begin? You can't actually find a boundary. The wave is the ocean. The ocean is waving at that particular spot in that particular way. And you are the universe peopling at this particular spot in this particular way. As the ocean waves, I like to say, the universe peoples. Every individual is an expression of the whole realm of nature, a unique action of the total universe. Now, you might know this intellectually. You might nod and say, yes, yes, we're all connected. We're all stardust. I saw that documentary. But here's the interesting thing. This fact is rarely, if ever, actually experienced by most individuals. Even those who know it to be true in theory do not sense or feel it. They continue to be aware of themselves as isolated egos inside bags of skin. The question is, why? Why do we know one thing with our minds and feel something entirely different in our bones? We've been hypnotized. Now, I don't mean that someone swung a watch in front of our faces and put us into a trance. I mean that from the moment we were born, we were trained to feel a certain way about ourselves. We were taught to answer to a name, to identify with a particular body, to distinguish between me and everything else. This is the ego, and the ego is not a thing. It's a social convention, a kind of fiction we all agree to maintain. You see, nature doesn't come thinged. Reality doesn't arrive neatly divided into separate objects with clear boundaries. We do that. We draw the lines, we make the distinctions, and then we forget that we drew them. The world doesn't come evented either. We chop up the continuous flow of existence into events and happenings and moments. But in reality, there are no separate events. Life moves along like water. It's all connected to the source of the river, which is connected to the mouth, which is connected to the ocean. You and I are as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. The only reason we don't feel this is that we've been told not to. We've been taught to draw a boundary at the edge of our skin and say, inside here is me, outside here is not me. But our bodies cannot exist except in a certain kind of natural environment. Take away the air and you suffocate. Take away the food and you starve. Take away the sun and you freeze. The organism and its environment are a single process. One transaction. Every individual is a unique manifestation of the whole, as every branch is a particular outreaching of the tree. That's such a beautiful image. Let it sink in. A branch looks different from a trunk. It goes off in its own direction, sprouts its own leaves, reaches toward its own patch of sky. We could look at a branch and say, there's a branch, as if it were a separate thing. But of course it isn't separate at all. It's the tree, branching. To manifest individuality, every branch must have a sensitive connection with the tree, just as our independently moving fingers must have a sensitive connection with the whole body. And here's the key point. Differentiation is not separation. The head and the feet are different, but they're not separate. They're parts of one functioning organism, and you are different from the stars, different from the trees, different from the other people around you, but not separate. The myths of our culture would have us believe that we're strangers here, accidents, flukes of blind matter. But if you awaken from this illusion, you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental, not as someone here on probation, not as something that arrived by mistake, but as essential to this universe as the stars themselves. Now, take a moment to consider something quite extraordinary. How is it possible that a being with such sensitive jewels as the eyes, such enchanted musical instruments as the ears, and such a fabulous arabesque of nerves as the brain can experience itself as anything less than a god? Really consider that. Your eyes are not just organs, they're the universe developing the capacity to see itself. Your ears are not just sensors, they're the cosmos evolving the ability to listen to its own harmonies. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. This is not metaphor. This is simply what's happening. The Big Bang didn't stop. It's still going on. And you're it. You're not something that happened as a result of the Big Bang. You are the Big Bang, continuing to unfold, becoming conscious of itself in this particular form, at this particular moment. Now you might ask, so what? What difference does it make whether I feel separate from the universe or continuous with it? It makes all the difference in the world. Because technology is destructive only in the hands of people who do not realize that they are one and the same process as the universe. When we feel like aliens confronting nature, we treat nature as something to be conquered, controlled, exploited. When we feel like expressions of nature, we treat it as we would treat ourselves. The ecological crisis, the climate crisis, the crisis of meaning that so many people feel, these all stem from the same root, the hallucination that we are separate from the world. And the healing also stems from the same root, waking up to what we actually are. So let's simply sit with this for a few moments. Notice the sounds around you. Those sounds aren't happening out there to some listener in here. There's just hearing. One process, one happening. Notice your breathing, the air moving in and out. Where does you stop and air begin? Notice the feeling of being alive right now. This sensation that there's somebody home. What if that's not a separate self looking out at a foreign world? What if that's the universe? looking at itself from this particular point of view. As the ocean waves, the universe peoples. You are that peopling. You always have been. Let that be enough for now.